Enjoy that certificate while it lasts, my mother said. And 11 relatives sitting around a long pine table at a cabin outside Ellijay, Georgia, went quiet. 3 days later, my pharmacy technician registration was revoked because someone had mailed forged documents to the state board in my name. I lost a hospital job in Knoxville that paid $22.75 an hour before I had even finished my second week of onboarding. Then a woman I had never met walked into a room in Cobb County and read one sentence out loud, and my father stopped blinking. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love seeing where you're all listening from. My name is Brittany Elaine Mercer. I'm 24 years old. Now let me take you back to Ellijay, Georgia. On Friday, March 15th, 2024. The cabin belonged to my uncle, David Mercer. It sat off Boardtown Road, up a gravel incline that made every car sound like it was dragging chains. My parents had chosen the trip because my brother Tyler had just signed a lease on a gym in Marietta, and my mother, Denise Mercer, liked occasions where there was a captive audience and nowhere to leave without making a scene. It was still cold enough that weekend for everyone to keep drifting back inside. The whole place smelled like coffee grounds, cedar, and the citronella log my aunt had lit, even though there were no mosquitoes yet. I had driven up from Knoxville in my 2013 silver Honda Civic after a 4-hour shift of online training modules for East Ridge Medical Center. I had my new badge packet in my tote bag, and I remember checking it twice because I was proud in a way I had not let myself be for a long time. Not proud in the loud way my family liked. Not the kind that needs an announcement. The quieter kind. The kind where you think maybe your life has finally started to belong to you. I had passed the national exam for pharmacy technicians in February. I paid for the prep class myself. $748.60, spread over 2 months, with one charge that overdrafted me by $19. I paid my Tennessee registration fee on March 4th. I uploaded my continuing education hours on March 6th. By March 11th, East Ridge had sent the final welcome email with my start date, March 18th, and the pay rate that made me sit on the side of my bed and cry into a Target pillow because I had spent most of age 23 working a chain drugstore counter for $17 an hour, while my mother kept saying I was good with details, which is useful if not ambitious. That Friday at the cabin, she had been in one of her controlled moods. If you know that type of parent, you know what I mean. Not screaming, never sloppy, just polished enough that if she says something cruel, everyone has to decide whether they imagined it. Dinner was grilled chicken, baked potatoes, and a salad my Aunt Karen had made with too much red onion. There were 11 of us at the table if you counted my cousin's fiancé. My mother raised her wine glass for Tyler and said he was the child who understands scale. Then she turned her head toward me with a smile that did not reach her eyes and said, "And Brittany has her little hospital certificate now. Enjoy that certificate while it lasts." No one laughed. My Aunt Karen put her fork down first. I heard it touch the plate. My cousin Lila looked at me, then at my mother. My father, Mark Mercer, kept buttering his potato like he had not heard a word. Tyler smiled into his beer because Tyler had spent our whole childhood learning that if our mother was aiming at me, his best option was to stay still. I said, "What does that mean?" My mother cut her chicken and said, "It means life is unpredictable. You are very naive about paperwork." That sentence sat in the room for maybe 4 seconds. I counted because I do that when I know something matters. Then my uncle started talking about fishing permits, and everybody did that family thing where they walk around the hole instead of looking into it. If you have ever had that moment where you know everything is about to change and everyone else has already decided not to help, you know the feeling. Not panic, the colder thing. The thing that makes you start saving screenshots before you even know why. Keep listening, because the next phone call was the one that took my entire week apart. I slept badly that night in the loft room because the mattress was thin and one of the windows did not seal all the way. Around 6:30 Saturday morning, I woke up to the smell of bacon and the scrape of my father's work boots on the porch. I went downstairs in socks, and my mother was already dressed, full makeup, silk blouse, making coffee like she was in her own kitchen and not a cabin in the woods. She was alone by the sink. I asked her again what she meant. She did not deny saying it. She never denied the words she was proud of. She just cleaned them up. She said, "Brittany, you have always been careless with records. If your board ever looked closely, I would not be surprised if there were consequences. You should not build your self-worth around temporary things." I said, "My records are fine." She looked at me over the rim of her mug. "I hope so." Then she walked past me into the dining area and asked if anyone wanted more fruit. That was the whole exchange. No yelling, no witness, just enough to make me feel crazy if I repeated it later. That was her gift. She could bruise you in a place nobody else could photograph. I left the cabin Sunday afternoon at 1:10. I remember the time because I sent my roommate a voice note at 1:14 saying, "I swear she knows something, and if this turns into anything weird, I'm keeping every email." My roommate, Hannah Ortiz, replied with a laughing voice note and said, "Please do. Also bring home coffee." Tuesday, March 19th, at 9:17 in the morning, I was in the parking garage at East Ridge Medical Center on Blackstock Avenue in Knoxville, trying to find level 3 because employee parking was full everywhere else. My phone rang from a Nashville number. I answered because hospital HR had been calling from random lines all week. It was not HR. It was a woman named Celeste Harper from the Tennessee Board of Pharmacy. Her voice was flat in the way people sound when they have repeated the same script all morning. She told me my state pharmacy technician registration had been summarily revoked, effective March 18th, due to material misrepresentation on my renewal documents, falsified continuing education records, and a signed written admission that I had knowingly submitted inaccurate information. She said a notice had been mailed to my address in Knoxville and a copy sent electronically to my employer. I sat down on the concrete curb beside my car. I said, "No, I did not send any admission. I did not falsify anything." She said, "Ms. Mercer, you may respond through the reconsideration instructions in the notice. I cannot discuss the case facts by phone." Case facts. That was the phrase she used, like my life had already moved into a folder with tabs. I called HR before I even opened the board email. The onboarding coordinator, Melissa Crane, picked up and sounded embarrassed. She said I could not continue working in the pharmacy until my registration was active again. She said they had to pause the position. That was the kind version. At 11:42, I got a second email saying the offer was withdrawn because I could not meet licensing conditions. I had worked there exactly one day in person. I did not cry in the garage. I did not call my mother. Instead, I drove to the far end of the lot, parked beside a dented white Tacoma, and read every line of the PDF on my phone 3 times. The packet included a typed letter dated March 12th, supposedly from me, saying I had accidentally claimed continuing education hours I did not complete. It included a signed statement, also supposedly from me, admitting ongoing difficulty managing documentation and deadlines, and asking the board for leniency. It included a notarized page with my forged signature under that statement. It included copies of 2 continuing education certificates from a provider in Memphis I had never used, with course numbers that looked real enough to fool somebody glancing quickly. The return address on the mailing label was a UPS store in Kennesaw, Georgia. My stomach dropped at the Kennesaw part because my father had opened a mailbox there for his bookkeeping side work the previous fall. That is how specific memory gets when it hurts. Not just that I recognized it. I remembered the exact day. October 7th, 2023. He had asked me to help him compare mailbox rental prices because You are better at the internet stuff. He ended up choosing the UPS store on Chastain Road because the first month was discounted. I knew the store number. I knew the cross street. I knew because I had looked it up for him on my own laptop while my mother stood behind me correcting my spelling of entrepreneur. I called Hannah. She did not say, maybe it's a misunderstanding. She said, take screenshots of everything and forward every attachment to a new email folder right now. So I did. I made folders called board letter, hospital emails, CE records, and Kennesaw. I took screenshots of the board email with the time visible. I downloaded the attachment metadata. I saved the voicemail Celeste Harper had left while I was calling HR. I drove straight home, sat cross-legged on my apartment floor, and made a spreadsheet with columns for date, sender, claim, and proof. At 2:26 that afternoon, I texted my mother, "Did you know anything about paperwork sent to the Tennessee Board of Pharmacy about me?" At 2:31, she wrote back, "Absolutely not. I am at lunch." At 2:33, she sent another one. "I told you only that life is unpredictable." At 2:37, my father called. He said, "Your mother is upset that you would accuse her." I said, "Did you use your Kennesaw mailbox to send anything to the board?" He said, "I will not entertain this." I said, "So that's a yes or no?" He hung up. By 6 that evening, my Aunt Karen texted me, "Are you okay? Your mother is saying there was an issue with falsified credentials and she is devastated for you." That was when I understood the second part. The revocation was not enough. They were going to narrate it before I could. I answered Karen with one line. "I did not falsify anything. Please save any text she sends you about it." Karen did not reply for 20 minutes. Then she sent, "I will." She had known something at the cabin. I knew she had. But she had done what everybody in my family did. She stayed quiet until silence became inconvenient. I barely slept that night. My apartment smelled like cold laundry and microwave rice because I had not opened a window all day. At 1:12 in the morning, I opened the forged admission letter again and noticed the signature line. They had used Brittany E. Mercer. I never sign that way. I sign Brittany Mercer on work documents and Brittany Elaine Mercer on anything official. My mother signs Denise L. Mercer on greeting cards and legal forms and everything else because she likes middle initials. She had made my fake signature look like hers. The next morning, Wednesday, I called the continuing education provider named on the fake certificates. It was a company in Memphis called Delta Health Learning. A woman named Roslyn Baker answered. She looked up both course numbers and told me neither one was valid, and the certificate format in my packet was from an old template they stopped using in 2022. I asked if she would email that. She did, 12 minutes later. I then called the notary listed on the statement. His name was Charles W. Hensley, commission number and all. The county line connected me to a clerk in Cobb County named Miriam Fisk, who told me that commission belonged to a Charles Hensley, whose notary term had expired in 2023 and who had died in November. I sat up straighter in my desk chair. I asked her to repeat it. She did. Then she said, almost apologetically, "Ma'am, if someone used that stamp this year, that is not legitimate." I wrote every word down in blue ink on the back of an old CVS receipt because my legal pad was in the kitchen and I did not want to lose the sentence. If you have ever had proof arrive 1 inch at a time while your body is still in shock, you know how strange it feels. Relief does not come first. Anger does. Then focus. And what I found next was the part that made this impossible for them to explain away. Before I get there, please like and subscribe if this story is hitting somewhere real for you. I know a lot of you have lived through the kind of family that counts on your confusion. Now, let me take you back to Thursday, March 21st, at 8:40 in the morning, in my kitchen in Knoxville. I was eating dry cereal out of a mug because my milk had gone bad when Celeste Harper finally returned my call. I had left 2 voicemails and 1 polite email asking how I could submit evidence that the documents were fake. Her tone was a little different this time, less scripted. She said I could send supporting documents by email for review on reconsideration. Plain English. It meant someone would look if I put enough paper in front of them. I asked if they had the envelope. She said yes. I asked if they had the full mailing scan. She said yes. I asked if the return label image was available. She paused, then said she could not promise anything, but she would ask records to include all received materials in the response packet. An hour later, I had sent her 14 attachments. The email subject line was, "Evidence that March 12th submission was fraudulent." I attached my actual continuing education completion confirmations from a Knoxville provider, my payment receipt, the Memphis company email saying the certificates were fake, my signature samples from onboarding forms, and a screenshot of my March 6th board portal submission showing the courses I really used. I also attached a photo of my passport signature page because at that point, I was treating my own identity like evidence. Then I called the UPS store in Kennesaw. I did not say, "My parents did this." I did not say, "Please help me catch them." I said, "Hi, my name is Brittany Mercer. I am trying to understand whether a package sent to the Tennessee Board of Pharmacy came from mailbox holder services at your location. It involves forged documents affecting my state registration." The man who answered was named Eric Saldana. He was careful. He told me he could not release private customer information over the phone, but if there was an investigation and a records request, they would respond. Then he said one useful thing without meaning to. He said, "If you have the label image, there should be a mailbox number under the store address." I zoomed in on the PDF. There it was, Suite 186. That was my father's box. I knew because I still had the photo he texted me in October when he was proud of his new business mail setup. Mailbox 186, UPS Store, 6740, Chastain Road, Kennesaw, Georgia. I found the image in my messages in under 30 seconds. I added it to the folder. At 12:14, I called my father one more time. He let it ring out. I sent him the image of the return label and his old text with the mailbox number visible. Then I wrote, "This is your mailbox. If you're involved in this, tell me now." No response. At 1:22, my mother called. She had that voice, the composed one she used with receptionists and teachers and waiters she wanted to put in their place while still sounding respectable. She said, "Your father uses that store. That does not mean he mailed anything concerning you. You are making very serious assumptions because you are emotional." I said, "The notary on the statement died last year." Silence. Then she said, "I do not know what documents you are looking at." I said, "The fake ones sent on March 12th. She said, "Brittany, if there were irregularities, perhaps someone was trying to help you correct your mistakes before they became more serious." I remember gripping the mug so hard my fingers hurt. I said, "Did you just say help me?" She answered in the same calm tone. "You are not stable when under pressure. You lose track of details. We have covered for that your whole life." That was a lie so old she could say it without effort. My whole life, I had been the one who kept school forms in a zip pouch, who reminded my father when tags expired, who found the warranty paperwork when Tyler cracked the washing machine lid and swore he had not touched it. In my family, competence was useful until it belonged to me. I ended the call. I did not scream. I did not threaten. Instead, I wrote down the time, 1:23 p.m., and everything she had said while it was still warm in my ears. That evening, East Ridge sent my final separation paperwork. It said my pre-employment offer had been withdrawn due to inability to satisfy registration requirements. I lost the sign-on bonus too. $2,000. I had already mentally spent some of it on catching up my power bill and replacing the front tires on my Civic before summer. A thing people do not talk about enough is how expensive it is when somebody sabotages you with paperwork. It is not just the job. It is the application fees, the gas, the uniforms, the shift meals you bought assuming a paycheck was coming, the way rent becomes an arithmetic problem overnight. By Monday, March 25th, I had borrowed $400 from Hannah to cover my half of April rent. I sold 2 unopened textbooks online for $90. I canceled my gym membership, my cloud storage upgrade, and the one streaming service I actually used. Every little number looked humiliating on paper. $14.99, $9.99, $86 for scrubs I had already hemmed. That is how long it took them to erase my next 3 months. My Aunt Karen called me that Tuesday at 7:18 in the evening. I was in the Aldi parking lot on Sutherland Avenue, loading groceries into the trunk in the dark because I had waited for markdowns. She said, "I need to tell you something, and I should have said it sooner." I leaned against the bumper and listened. The weekend before the cabin trip, my mother had stopped by Karen's house in Woodstock with a manila envelope and asked to borrow her printer because the cabin won jams. Karen said she saw one page on the counter with my name on it and what looked like an official seal. She did not read it all. She told herself it was probably insurance, or school, or something my mother had permission to handle. Then at the cabin, after that dinner comment, Karen realized it might not have been innocent. She said she stayed quiet because she did not want to accuse anyone without knowing. I said, "You watched her say that to me and still said nothing." Karen started crying, which I did not have energy for. She said, I know, I was wrong." Then she told me one useful thing. My mother had asked if Karen still had Charles Hensley's old notary stamp because Karen had cleaned out some of his office things after he died. Charles had been Karen's father-in-law. Karen had said no because the stamp had gone to his son, but she remembered the question because it felt odd. I closed my trunk slowly. I said, "When was that?" "March 9th, she said. "Saturday morning." I wrote it down on the back of my grocery receipt. Eggs, spinach, rice, notary stamp question. I asked Karen if she would put all of that in writing. She hesitated for 2 seconds. Then she said yes. By 9:40 that night, I had her email. The next day, I forwarded it to Celeste Harper. This is the part where people assume the truth made everything simple. It did not. Institutions move slowly, and families move fast. My parents started calling people before the board had even answered me. They told my grandmother's church circle in Marietta that I had cheated a medical credential process. They told my cousin Lila that I was lashing out because I was ashamed. My brother Tyler texted me on March 28th and said, "Mom says if you stop making accusations, Dad might help you get another retail job." Another retail job. That message is still in my phone. I wrote back, "Did you know they use Dad's mailbox?" He did not respond until the next day. He said, "I know he has a mailbox. I do not know anything else." That was Tyler all over. He always lived one room away from the truth, close enough to hear the sound of it, never close enough to be responsible. On Monday, April 1st, at 10:52 in the morning, Celeste Harper emailed to say the board had reopened the file for review and wanted originals or certified copies of supporting documents where possible. I took a bus to a shipping store because my printer had started streaking. I printed everything in duplicate and organized it in a white binder with plastic tabs. The smell of toner and cardboard made me feel like college finals. Except this time the exam was whether my own life would be returned to me. I added a section called Contradictions. Under it, I put the fake admission letter next to my actual portal submission. I put the forged signature next to 6 authentic signatures from work and school. I highlighted the middle initial difference. I added the email from Delta Health Learning. I added the county clerk confirmation on Charles Hensley. I added Karen's statement. I added screenshots showing my father's mailbox number. I also printed my mother's text. "I told you only that life is unpredictable." Then I called someone outside the family entirely. My friend Raina Patel from community college had gone into compliance work for a surgery center in Chattanooga. Not a lawyer. The better thing, honestly. Someone who lived in records all day and knew how institutions think. Raina came over that Saturday with a yellow legal pad and a bag of tangerines. She sat at my kitchen table, read every page, and said, "Whoever did this expected you to panic and speak emotionally. Do not. Build them a timeline they can hold." So we did. Dates, times, calls, statements, mailing source, notary issue, fake CE source, every point backed by one document. She made me remove 3 adjectives because, in her words, proof does not need decoration. If you have ever had one calm friend sit beside your disaster and turn it into order, you know how holy that feels. What happened next came from a person who had no reason to care about my family and no idea he was about to break the whole story open. Stay with me, because this is where the paper trail stopped being theoretical. Now let me take you back to Wednesday, April 10th, 2024, at 3:04 in the afternoon. I was at my apartment table with my laptop open and the binder in front of me when a number from Georgia called. It was a man named Nolan Reeves, an investigator assigned through the Tennessee Board's review unit. His job title sounded bigger than the actual conversation. He was direct, and I appreciated that immediately. He said, "Ms. Mercer, we requested source documents connected to the mailing. There are discrepancies." I said, "What kind of discrepancies?" He said, "The shipping receipt tied to the package appears to have been reprinted the same day. Also, the mailbox location confirmed the package was accepted over the counter, not dropped after hours." I sat very still. He continued, "We are also having difficulty with the notary information. The stamp details belong to a deceased notary. That is a significant issue." I said, "Can you tell who brought the package in?" He paused. Then he said, "The store employee remembered a woman asking for a clearer receipt because the first one printed crooked." A woman. I closed my eyes for 1 second because I could see my mother doing exactly that. She was the sort of person who treated a crooked receipt like a moral offense. If a machine gave her anything imperfect, she wanted it corrected in front of her. Not because she needed it, because she liked seeing systems obey. Nolan Reeves said they were not done. But if I had any proof placing my parents in Kennesaw around March 12th, I should send it. I thought of my mother's Facebook, which she used like a local newspaper no one had asked for. Sure enough, she had posted on March 12th at 11:16 a.m. Lunch break with my favorite person in Kennesaw before errands. The photo showed half a Cobb salad, my father's watch, and the red check presenter from Capers on Main. I took a screenshot before she could delete it. Then I checked my father's debit card habits in my head and remembered he had once asked me to help him dispute a duplicate parking charge in downtown Kennesaw. My family used me like unpaid admin until the minute it became useful to call me unstable. I searched old texts and found one from that same day, March 12th, at 1:42 p.m. He had asked, "What is the phone number for Regions Fraud Line?" The context below it was gone, but the time was not. I sent Nolan the Facebook screenshot and the text chain. At 5:21, my mother texted in all complete sentences the way she did when she wanted a message screenshotted later and interpreted kindly. She wrote, "I understand you are contacting people in ways that may create confusion. Your father and I have supported you financially and emotionally for years. It is extremely hurtful that you are trying to connect ordinary errands to your own licensing problems. Supported me financially. By then, I had not accepted money from them in 14 months. The last thing they had paid for was half a car repair in January 2023, which my mother had mentioned at least 11 times since." I did not answer her text. Instead, I added it to the folder. Friday, April 12th. I drove to Marietta because my grandmother, June Mercer, had a cardiology appointment and had asked if I could take her since "your mother is busy with Tyler's gym nonsense." I said yes for 2 reasons. 1, I loved my grandmother. 2, in my family, errands were where the truth sometimes leaked out. The waiting room at Wellstar smelled like lemon disinfectant and old magazines. My grandmother wore a navy cardigan and kept patting my hand like I was 12. On the drive back to her condo off Lower Roswell Road, she said, very casually, "Your mother had your old signature pages spread all over my dining table one afternoon. I thought she was making a photo book." I looked at her. "When was that?" She thought for a second. "Early March. The same day she borrowed my ring light for copying papers clearly." My grandmother was 81 and not stupid. She had spent 40 years watching my mother perform competence and call it love. I asked, "Did you see what kind of papers?" She said, "Some looked like school forms. One was your old volunteer certificate from high school. She said your signature had always changed too much." I almost laughed at the ugliness of it. My mother had been practicing my signature from old documents. My grandmother went quiet for a minute. Then she said, "Brittany, I should have asked more questions." There it was again. The sentence people say, when the dangerous part is already over for them. I said, "Can you text me what you just said when I drop you off?" She did, at 4:57 p.m., with more clarity than half the adults in my family had managed all month. That weekend, my mother deleted the Kennesaw lunch post. Too late. On Tuesday, April 16th, East Ridge's pharmacy director, a woman named Sandra Leak, called and asked whether there was any update, because they still had a staffing hole, and she had heard there may have been fraud involved, but not on your part. That was the first moment I understood the story outside my family was shifting. I said the board was reviewing evidence, and I hoped to have an answer soon. She said, "Keep me posted. Off the record, your references spoke highly of you." I thanked her, hung up, and sat on the edge of my bed staring at the wall for a full minute. Sometimes dignity comes back in very small installments. A phone call, a sentence, somebody using your name like it still means what it used to. On Thursday, April 18th, Nolan Reeves called again. He told me the board had received records from the UPS store confirming mailbox 186 belonged to Mark Mercer Enterprises, LLC. The package had been mailed over the counter at 2:08 p.m. on March 12th. The associate on duty, Eric Saldana, had written a statement after seeing the label image and said he remembered a middle-aged white couple, woman speaking, man paying. He also remembered the woman asking for a fresh printout because the first receipt was not legible enough. I wrote every word down. Then Nolan said the thing that changed the direction of the whole case. He said, "There is one more issue. The admission letter includes your email address, but the attachment metadata shows the document was created on a laptop registered to Denise Mercer." I think I stopped breathing for a second. I asked him to repeat it, and he did. The PDF properties showed author name D. Mercer. Not a smoking gun by itself, he said, but when combined with the rest, it mattered. D. Mercer. My mother loved putting her name in software registrations. On iPads, laptops, printers, label makers. It was one of those tiny controlling habits that make a person easier to find later. If you have ever watched someone build their own trap because they were too arrogant to imagine being checked, you know the feeling. The next part was still not a clean victory. People who lie well do not stop just because they are cornered. They try one more version. And my parents did. My father called me that night at 8:06. The Braves game was audible in the background. He sounded tired in a rehearsed way. He said, "Your mother was attempting to draw attention to inconsistencies before they harmed your future. Things have become distorted." I said, "She forged a dead man's notary stamp." He said, "Do not speak like that." I said, "The board has the shipping records." Silence. Then he said, "If your mother made an error in judgment, it was from concern." An error in judgment, like she had overwatered a plant. I said, "Yipo, you paid for the shipment." He exhaled through his nose. "I was handling errands. I do not inspect every envelope in my marriage." That sentence told me two things. 1, he was not denying it. 2, he had already decided his role would be passive logistics. Men like my father think they can live in the receipt margins and never become the story. I said, "Do not contact my employer again." He said, "I never did." I had not told him anyone had contacted my employer. I wrote that down too. 3 days later, Sunday afternoon, my cousin Lila called from a Publix parking lot and told me she had overheard my mother talking to one of her church friends. Denise said she had warned the hospital they should verify Brittany's honesty. Lila sounded shaken. She had spent years trying to believe my mother was just strong. That illusion was finally costing someone else in a way she could not pretty up. I asked Lila if she would text me what she heard. She did. By the end of April, my binder had grown thick enough that the rings barely closed. 43 pages plus screenshots. 2 witness statements from family members who had stayed quiet too long. 1 clerk confirmation. 1 CE provider email. 1 shipping statement. 1 metadata note. 1 deleted Facebook post screenshot. 1 text where my mother practically narrated her own motive. I had been keeping that folder for 11 months in my mind before I ever built it on paper. That is what it felt like. Now let me take you back to Friday, May 3rd, 2024, at 9:10 in the morning, to a conference room on the 4th floor of a state office building in Nashville. I wore a plain blue blouse and black pants because I wanted to look steady, not dramatic. Raina came with me and sat one seat over. The conference room smelled like dry HVAC air and burned coffee. There were 6 people there before my parents arrived. Celeste Harper from the board, Nolan Reeves, a board attorney named Alicia Brent, a note-taker whose name I never caught, then me and Raina. My parents walked in at 9:19. My mother wore cream slacks and a green silk shell, like this was a lunch reservation she intended to improve by attending. My father wore his gray sport coat and the expression he saves for tax season and funerals. My brother Tyler was not there. Of course he was not. Tyler never came to rooms where facts lived. No one hugged anyone. Alicia Brent explained that the meeting was to clarify the submission that led to my revocation and determine whether the board would vacate that action immediately. She used more official language than I am using now, but that was the shape of it. My mother folded her hands and said, "We are here because Brittany has a pattern of disorganization that others often mistake for victimhood." Raina's pen stopped moving. I did not answer. I looked at Alicia Brent. Alicia said, "Mrs. Mercer, we will ask the questions." Then they started walking through documents one by one. The fake CE certificates. My mother said she had never seen them. The forged admission letter. She said the wording sounded like something Brittany would write under stress. The notary stamp. My father said he knew nothing about notaries. The shipping label from mailbox 186. My father said he had many business mailings and could not identify a single package from memory. Then Nolan Reeves slid a printed page across the table. It was the UPS store statement from Eric Saldana. He read one paragraph aloud. He did not know what it meant to us. That was the power of it. He was just reading what the witness had signed. He said, "Customer was a middle-aged white couple. Female customer spoke for both parties and requested a new receipt because the first print was crooked and not clear enough. Male customer paid. Package accepted over counter at 2:08 p.m., March 12, 2024. The room went quiet. My mother said, "That could describe anyone." Then Alicia Brent placed the metadata sheet beside the forged admission letter. She said, "The document was created on March 11th on a device registered to D. Mercer." My mother blinked once. My father looked down at the table. Then the last person walked in, 5 minutes late, breathless from the elevator, Miriam Fisk from the Cobb County Clerk's office. I had not known she was coming. Neither had my parents. She sat, opened a slim folder, and said, I am here because the notary stamp used on the submission belongs to Charles W. Hensley, whose commission expired and whose death was recorded on November 21, 2023. Any notarization created under that commission in March 2024 is invalid. She turned one page and continued, I also want to note that on March 9th, Denise Mercer called our office asking whether an expired notary seal could still be used if the wording remained legible. Staff told her no. My mother made a small sound in her throat, not a gasp, more like someone swallowing water wrong. Alicia Brent asked, Mrs. Mercer, did you place that call? My mother said, I do not recall. Miriam replied, the call log reflects your number ending in 3184. That was my mother's cell. My father started to say, Denise, and stopped after the first syllable. I remember that with perfect clarity. If you have ever needed the truth to come from a stranger, because the people who should have defended you never would, you know exactly why that moment mattered. I could have screamed the whole story for weeks, and it would not have landed the same way. It had to come from a clerk with a folder and no emotional investment at all. The meeting did not end there. Alicia asked whether my parents wanted to revise any earlier statements. My father said, I was not aware of the notary issue. It was a weak sentence, and everyone in the room knew it. My mother said, my intentions have been mischaracterized. Alicia asked, did you create the admission letter? My mother said, I was trying to prevent long-term harm. That was her version of yes. At 10:02, Alicia stepped out with Celeste and Nolan. We sat in silence for 6 minutes. I counted them. The air vent clicked every 17 seconds. Raina drew one straight line down her legal pad. My mother stared at the wall clock as if punctuality might save her. When the board staff returned, Alicia said my revocation was being vacated immediately based on fraudulent third-party submission. A corrected notice would be issued that day. My registration would be restored retroactively to March 18th. She also said the board was referring the forged documents and notary misuse to the appropriate agencies in Georgia and Tennessee for review. My father looked at me for the first time all morning. He said, you have what you wanted. I said, no, I have what was mine. That was the longest sentence I gave him all year. Outside the building, Nashville was bright and windy. The parking lot smelled like hot asphalt and honeysuckle from somewhere I could not see. Raina hugged me once, hard, then held me back by the shoulders and said, now email the hospital before your mother invents another version. So I did, from the passenger seat of her car. I attached the corrected notice. I wrote 4 lines. My registration was active. The prior revocation had been vacated. Fraud by third parties had been confirmed. I remained interested in the position if it was still open. Sandra Leek responded within 43 minutes. She asked if I could come in Monday. I sat there with my phone in my hand and laughed once. Just once. Not because it was funny, because my body had to put the pressure somewhere. Now let me take you back to Monday, May 6th, at 1:20 in the afternoon, to the Employee Health Office at East Ridge Medical Center. The same fluorescent lights, the same squeaky vinyl chairs, the same forms. But this time when they printed my badge, nobody looked embarrassed handing it to me. Sandra Leek met me outside the pharmacy and said, we are very glad this was corrected. Then, after a pause, HR is also processing back pay for the orientation shifts you lost. The amount came to $1,365.50 before taxes. I know because I still have the stub. It was not enough to cover what the month cost me, but it mattered. It was a number on paper saying the interruption had not been my fault. I started work for real that week. The pharmacy smelled like blister packs, sanitizer, and printer heat. The techs moved fast and spoke in abbreviations I had to learn by sound. By Friday, my feet ached and my shoulders hurt, and I had never been more grateful to be tired for an ordinary reason. But winning quietly does not mean the story is over quietly. The consequences for my parents arrived in layers. The first one hit my father on May 21st. The regional bank in Marietta, where he handled overflow bookkeeping for 3 small businesses, terminated his contractor relationship after one of the clients learned his mailbox had been used in a document fraud matter. He lost the largest account immediately, a landscaping company on Roswell Road worth $14,800 a year to him. He called my grandmother and said it was an overreaction to a domestic misunderstanding. She told him she was too old for euphemisms and hung up. The second hit my mother in June. She was the volunteer treasurer for her church women's ministry in Marietta. Not paid, but prized. The kind of role she loved because it came with keys, spreadsheets, and the right to correct other women in hallways. After the board referral made its way into a local follow-up inquiry in Cobb County, the church asked her to step down from all financial handling until the matter was resolved. She lost access to the accounts, the events budget, and the summer retreat planning she had been running like a private kingdom. She cared about that almost as much as she cared about being right. The third consequence was the one she never believed would happen. On July 9th, a detective from Cobb County took a report on the forged notary stamp and the mailing. I am saying that plainly because you asked for plain language. She was named in it. So was my father. I did not need to chase them around demanding justice. The documents got where they needed to go. In August, after several weeks of phone calls and records requests I was not part of, my mother agreed through a restitution process tied to the investigation to repay me for direct documented losses, $3,842.18. That covered the loss sign on bonus portion I could document as rescinded, the scrubs and onboarding expenses I had no reason to buy otherwise, mileage for the failed start week, and 1 month of rent support tied to the gap her fraud created. The check came from an account I recognized because she had once used it to reimburse me $36 for a bridesmaid dress hem and insisted I note "paid in full" in the memo line. This time, the memo line said, restitution. I stared at that word for a long time. My father mailed the check certified. Of course he did. My brother Tyler called 2 days later and said, "Mom is under a lot of stress." I said, "I know." He waited for me to soften the sentence. I did not. Then he said, "Do you think this can ever be normal again?" I looked around my apartment. The dish rack, the pharmacy flashcards, the little patch of sun on my kitchen floor. I thought about the cabin in Ellijay and my mother smiling over grilled chicken like she had already arranged my future. I thought about the parking garage curb and the dead notary, and my aunt finally deciding silence had become too expensive. I said no, but it can be honest from here, if anyone is interested in that. Tyler did not answer. The family reaction split exactly how you would expect. Aunt Karen became painfully supportive. Too late, but real. She now sends me screenshots before I have to ask. Cousin Lila stopped speaking to my mother for 4 months after learning Denise had warned the hospital about my honesty. My grandmother moved her important papers out of her condo desk and into a lockbox at her bank because, in her words, "I am done underestimating what your mother considers protective." That sentence hurt in a clean way because it was true. As for my parents, they tried one final version in September. They invited me to lunch at a restaurant in Ackworth and said they wanted to put this behind us. My mother wore navy and pearls. My father ordered tea like it was a client meeting. The restaurant smelled like fryer oil and lemon wedges. My mother said, "I made an imperfect decision from a place of concern. You were moving too fast into a field where one paperwork error can ruin lives." I said, "You forged papers to ruin mine first." She looked at my father. He said, "You know your mother worries." I said, "Worry does not explain the mailbox, the dead notary, the hospital call, or the restitution check." Then I unfolded one page from my purse and placed it on the table. Not a threat, just a fact. It was the corrected board notice restoring my registration in full and naming the revocation as based on fraudulent third-party materials. My mother read the first line, then put it back down. She said, "Must you carry that everywhere?" I said, "No, I carry it where I need it." We finished lunch in 27 minutes. I paid for my own salad and left. If you have ever had someone try to rebrand your destruction as love, please hear me clearly. You do not owe them a softer vocabulary just because they are family. You do not owe them confusion, and you do not have to be dramatic to be done. Before I finish, please take a second to like and subscribe if you genuinely connect with this story. There are a lot of women listening right now who were taught that calm means weak. It does not. Sometimes calm is just evidence with a pulse. It has been long enough now that people ask whether I forgive them. I do not know if forgive is the word. I know I no longer argue with people who need my mother to be well-intentioned in order to feel comfortable at holidays. I know my registration is active, my work is good, and my direct deposit hits every other Friday at 6:14 in the morning. I know I got promoted to senior tech trainer in February 2025, and the pay moved to $24.10 an hour. I know my manager trusts me with narcotics counts and inventory variances because, ironically, I am exactly what my mother mocked me for being. Careful, exact, good with records. And I know what my parents lost. My father lost the bookkeeping contract he had been building for 3 years, and 2 more clients after word got around among the small business owners who traded referrals over breakfast on Whitlock Avenue. My mother lost her church treasurer role, her access to any ministry funds, and a reputation she had curated for 2 decades as the woman who could be trusted with paperwork. In the investigation file, the harm has a date, a tracking number, and her phone number attached to a question about a dead man's seal. That is concrete enough for me. The last time I saw both of them in one room was Thanksgiving, at my grandmother's condo in Marietta. 12 people. One folding card table for the younger cousins. Turkey, sweet potatoes, and the smell of scorched butter because the rolls went too dark. My mother kept trying to direct where everyone sat, and for the first time in my life, nobody listened quickly. Not dramatically, just not quickly. That kind of shift is quiet, but it is real. At one point, my grandmother asked me how work was going, and I told her I had started training new hires on controlled medication logs. My mother opened her mouth, maybe to say something about detail or pressure or caution. Then she closed it. Silence can be expensive. That day, it was hers. I am not healed in the neat way people like to package these stories. I still save more screenshots than I probably need to. I still keep a hard copy folder in a fire safe under my bed with tabs labeled board, work, family, and mail. I still check signatures on anything sent to me twice. When unknown numbers from Georgia call, my shoulders tighten before my brain catches up. Damage does not disappear because you won. But my life is mine again. Not because they handed it back, because I documented it, held still, and let the right people say the right facts in the right rooms. That is the part I want any woman listening to remember. You do not have to outshout people who are used to being believed. You just have to outlast their version with better paper. My name is Brittany Elaine Mercer. I am 24 years old. My parents forged documents to have my professional certification revoked, and it cost them money, work, access, and the lie they had built about who I was. I still do not go to cabins with them.